In this episode, I'll share with you step by step how to get amazing looking results by using auto body filler to fix a large dent in this truck's bedside. Howdy everyone, Chris here. Welcome back to Garage Noise. If this is your first time here, this channel is dedicated to helping you with your repair or restoration project, giving you all the information you need to get that job done. This truck has a nasty looking dent in the rear part of this bedside. It's affected 3 different body lines. We're going to repair those. I'll share with you how to get those right. But the first step is to remove the trim, the tail light, the wheel opening molding, and the inner fender. Now that I've got the trim removed on this bedside, we need to address this dent. It's got a couple body lines here, one here, one right here. What I'm going to do is grind this section. We're going to weld a Mo clamp right on that body line. This is the Mo clamp here. It comes with a bunch of different size tabs. So what we'll do is we'll weld a tab on there, and then this clamp slides into here, and then you pull it. We'll pull it with the tower and a chain fall. And we've got a big crown right here. It is a little bit of a crown, but it's also part of the natural body lines and contours of this bedside. So we got to be careful. We're not going to knock that flat. We're going to pull this out, and hopefully most of this will come out. There's a big low air section here. This body line's been affected right here. This body line ends right about there. So let's grind this and let's start pulling. Here I'm going to use my Astro angle grinder with a 36 grit roll-lock disc to remove the paint in preparation for the welding we're going to be doing. I'll also use the belt sander to get deep in that crease to remove that paint. And then we'll just throw a couple tack welds on this tab and we'll get ready to pull. This is the pulling tower I'll be using. I've got some pods anchored to the concrete, so we just tie that tower down to the ground, and then I'll use a chain fall hooked up to the tower and hook the other end up to the clamp, and we'll pull out that metal. As we pull it out, we're going to tap down any high areas. We're going to tap down that crown up above. Now, most of that low area came out, so we just have to knock that crown down just a little bit, and we'll have to put a thin coat of filler over it. It's going to take several different pulls on these body lines to get those back into shape. I'll finish pulling this and get this metal roughed into shape, and then I'll show you how we fine tune it and get it ready for some body filler. Once you have your metal pulled out and roughed in, you may be able to use a thin coat of filler to straighten that panel out. If you can use a 1/4 inch of filler or a little bit more and flatten that metal out, go ahead and do it. You may have to refine those small dents and get those pulled out. And in order to do that, you might want to use a stud welder like this. This tool welds a pin onto those low areas, and then you can use a slide hammer to pull or slide hammer those dings out. This is the tool I'll be using today. It's the G90E. It has a lot of different options for removing dents, shrinking metal. Now, the tip I'll be using today is a triangle tip, and it welds into the center of the dent or any little low area, and I can pull or slide hammer those areas out. This tool really helps me fine-tune the shaping of this metal so I can use as little filler as possible. Now I'll use the G90E and a body hammer, and I'll use the G90E to pull out the larger dings that I see. And as I pull those out, I'll use my body hammer to tap down the high areas around those. I want to level out this metal as much as possible before we start applying body filler. Here I'm using my body hammer and a spoon to flatten out that crown on the upper part of this bedside. I'm using the spoon because it's going to spread out the blow of the hammer, and I don't want to create any dents from the hammer. I want to gradually tap down that crown and just flatten it out a little bit so I can use a thin coat of filler to block it smooth. Later on, we'll be using a guide coat to identify any inconsistencies in the shape of this metal, but for now, I'm going to use the flat part of my hand and move quickly over the panel, feeling for any high or low areas. Now I'll use a flat black spray paint as a guide coat over this bare metal. I find that paint works a little bit better than the powdered guide coat on bare metal. So we'll spray this down with a light coat, and then we'll be able to block over this, and this will expose any high or low areas that we need to address. Now I use a small block on some 180 grit sandpaper to block over this repair area. This is going to remove that guide coat from any high areas, expose those low areas so we can repair them. Now we can see the low areas that we need to pull out with the G90E. I'll use a combination of tools here, the G90E to pull out those low areas, and then I'll also use a hammer and a spoon to flatten that metal back out. And then we'll run over it with a metal file to show us any high or low areas that are left. And we'll just continue working this metal out until we have it relatively straight so we can put a thin coat of filler over it to block it flat. The metal is now ready for some filler, so we need to prep out the paint around this repair area so when we apply our filler we have good adhesion. So we'll use 80 grit sandpaper on the orbital sander and get this all sanded and prepped out to apply our filler. Okay, so I've just mixed up a little bit of filler here. I did add some plastic honey. We've got a little bit of hardener here. It's a little bit warmer today, so we're not using as much hardener. But we just want to do a skim coat on this, and then we're going to block it down quickly. Fill all those little low areas first, but there is a little bit of a low area here, so we'll be putting some filler in here. Right here is where the contour change or the plane changes. So this is a different plane than this. Fold it in, press out the air till it's all one uniform color with no streaks. And then we want to work quickly in laying this filler in. I'm going to get a little bit on my spreader here. Just like that, and we're going to spread it in here. I'll work this in sections. So I'll do this section first, fill this. Of course, we're probably going to have to put another coat on this, so I'm going to go start at that body line. Okay, so we added our first coat of filler, just a skim coat. We just want to fill all the low areas. Now we're going to rough it in, and the quickest way to do this is just use a palm sander with 80 grit sandpaper. Machine sand it flat as possible. It's going to fill those low areas, and then we'll put another skim coat of filler on it. This is the quickest way to do it. If we try and block all this out, I mean, this is the way I like to do it. Just knock it down, put another skim coat on, and then block it with a block. After shaping it with the orbital sander and some 80 grit sandpaper, we flattened out most of this body filler and filled those low areas. A couple little low areas left. We are going to have to use some more filler on this, but I'm going to get a block with some 80 grit sandpaper on it and block that plane that's in the center of that bedside. We're going to flatten that out a little bit. See if there's any high areas. If we break through to any bare metal, that's going to be a high area, so we'll need to tap that down and before we put our next coat of filler on. I apply a guide coat here, and then I'll block over it with some 80 grit sandpaper and a small block. I want to hold that block flat and move with the contours of the panel. This is just so I have a good idea of the low areas and the areas I need to concentrate on when I apply my next coat of filler. Here's the technique you can use with tape to start shaping your body lines. I'm going to section off the center part of this repair. That is a flat plane in the center there. I'm going to fill that first. So I'm going to border it with tape. Now I can fill this section with filler, block it flat and smooth, and I'll have created a couple body lines on either side of that plane. This is the easiest section to repair because it's relatively flat. I can use a long block on it to get it straight, and then we can work off of those body lines and fix the rest of the repair. I want to pull the tape when the body filler has started to harden. And then we'll go ahead and grab some 80 grit sandpaper, and I'll block this straight, holding the block flat, going in an X pattern and flattening this out. I'm not trying to get it perfectly straight. We just want to get it shaped. And then we'll tape off that section, and we'll do this front lip or plane, and we'll fill that a little bit. It was a little bit low. And then we'll go ahead and fill the other side of that tape. Listen, I hope you're finding this video helpful so far. If you are, you can help support the channel by liking this video and leaving me a comment down below. And please consider subscribing to the channel if you want to learn more about paint and body repair. Now I'll pull the tape, and we need to block this body filler out. Now for speed, I'm going to use the palm sander with some 80 grit sandpaper on it. And I'm going to hold it flat against the panel, move with the contours of the panel in order to get this panel straight. Now, if you're unfamiliar with using a palm sander, I would recommend that you just rough it in with the palm sander and smooth it out, and then switch over to a block. Now, on this particular panel, it has a lot of contours. So if you need to hold that block flat against the panel, block in an X pattern, so you probably need a flexible block that's going to move with those contours. I will be switching over to a long block to do the final blocking on this panel to make sure it's absolutely straight before we get it into primer. After blocking this out, I'm going to mark off the body lines with my body line tool. This is just an adjustable tool that I use on the edge of the wheel opening to mark out where that body line is. I'll use this as a reference when I'm doing the rest of the repair. You can really lose the body lines when you have filler over it because there's no shadows to show you where those body lines are at. Just a handy little tool to help with the repair. If you're looking for any tools or products for your repair, check out my storefront link down in the description. There I have them categorized and organized so they're really easy to find. Once again, I've taped off that center section on those body lines because I needed to fill a little low area at the top of this bedside. Here I'm blocking out the top section with some 80 grit sandpaper, and then we're going to apply one more coat of filler. This is our final coat of filler, so we'll clean off the panel real well. I use some isopropyl alcohol, and then I have mixed up some icing. This is a polyester glazing putty that fills any low areas or any imperfections. So we've went over most of this with 80 grit, and then we've got 80 grit scratches in it. So we're going to fill any of those deep scratches that we can't block sand out. And I'm also going to correct a couple little waves in the rest of this panel. So we're going to put this over most of the repair. I've taped off that center section because I want to keep that body line nice and crisp. And we'll lay this filler in and block it. The product I'm using today, Icing, is designed to go over properly sanded paint. It calls for 180 to 80 grit scratches in order to promote good adhesion. Now, always check the technical data sheet for the products that you're using. This is going to give you a reference to what substrates you can apply your filler over. So off camera, I went ahead and blocked out this icing. I used a long, flexible block with 180 grit sandpaper, and you can find that block link down in my description. Now I'm going to coat it with some guide coat to show us any high or low areas. We'll block over it once again with the long flexible block, holding that block flat against the panel and blocking in an X pattern. Do you want some awesome garage noise gear? Well, you can register to win this t-shirt by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving the comment #GarageNoiseGear. In 1 week from the release of this video, we'll randomly pick a winner. Good luck. I did one final block sanding on this with 320 grit sandpaper to fine tune those 180 grit scratches. Now it's time to primer, so we masked it off, and the primer we're using today is the upol 2K urethane primer. This is a relatively new primer to me, but I'm excited to share it with you guys because it's reasonably priced at right around $100. This primer mixes up 4-to-1. That's 4 parts primer, 1 part activator. So we'll find the mixing ratio at the top of this cup, 4-to-1-to-1. We'll put 4 parts primer in and then 1 part activator, and we'll be ready to mix this up and spray. I'm using the 3M Performance gun with a 1.4 tip for this primer. Now we've cleaned this panel we've used isopropyl alcohol to wash down this panel before we primer. I've turned my volume to 2 turns out on the volume. My air pressure is set at about 15 psi, and my fan pattern is primarily wide open. You spray primer just like you would spray paint. We want to put one good coat on, and then we'll let it flash off for 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll put another coat on. We want to have enough material on this that we can block sand it out after it dries. You want to apply your primer as smooth as possible, but it's not crucial because we are going to be block sanding this in order to straighten out this panel and make sure it's perfectly straight before we paint it. Learn the next step in this process by clicking on one of these videos now. I appreciate each and every one of you watching, and we'll see you next time on Garage Noise.